sit here. Too much marketing for that. Yes, it is too much. But it needs to show. I have no water. Thank you. No, I want rainwater.
Oh, yes, rainwater is rainwater.
No, this is not rainwater.
Blended.
No, and we put it here.
Yes, I wanted to do that.
Yes, where they can all see it.
Gigi's not here, no?
You join us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You can get some.
If we start off by saying don't panic, they will panic. Is that the normal rule?
No, I think so too.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Makosini Mkitwa. I'm the head of communication and spokesperson in the Ministry of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation. Before I introduce the panelists and to give you the business of the day, first of all, I want to profusely apologize for the confusion that transpired regarding what time the press briefing was going to start. It's not the fault of the politicians, it's the fault of us, the officials. We dropped the ball. In this respect, it is not going to happen again. Interestingly, the mistake was between Sputnik and myself. We can't really say that we're going to learn, we can't really say that we're still young, you know. Sputnik and I have great years. But these things happen, they're not going to happen again. Let me introduce the panelists for today. First, we have the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu. We have the Chairperson of the Rand Water Board, Advocate Matsiliso Hashatse. We have the Chief Executive of Rand Water, Mr. Sipho Msai. We have the MMC, sorry, I got my introductions all wrong. I should have mentioned the MMC responsible for water and sanitation, Eteguruleni Alderman Gauteng. We also have the provincial manager for water and sanitation in Gauteng is an official, Mr. Mtembu. Those are people who will speak as and when there's a need, maybe if you've got technical questions that you need answered. But also important is the brand new head of communication and marketing at Rand Water, Tebuho Joala. Some of you know him from his time at Tswane. He's now here and helping us communicate the very important message of water and sanitation. Now, today's media briefing is precisely about what you've been reading about in the media, the challenges of water caused by drought and various other factors. But the Minister will talk about that and the CE will talk about that. But as a housekeeping request that I want to make.
We apologize for coming out of that briefing. We'll go back to it a little bit later on. Let's take a look at some other
interesting stories you may have read in the tabloids yesterday. We're not going to be talking about that here. We are going to be talking only about water and sanitation issues. That's for a simple reason that when we talk about other things, we tend to detract from the business of the day, which you all came here to talk about. So we will restrict ourselves to water and sanitation issues during the course of this briefing. So how it's going to happen is that I'm going to give the opportunity to the Chair of Advocate Hashatse to introduce the Minister. The Minister will speak, the CE will speak. After that, we'll open questions to you. After that, then the briefing will conclude. If you've got other matters that you want to ask that are not relevant to the briefing, you can always doorstep the people that you want to talk to. I hope we can be in agreement in that respect. I shall now introduce Advocate Matsriso Hashatse to introduce the Minister for the Steps.
Thanks, Makosini. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from the media and colleagues. Good afternoon, Minister, and welcome to Rand Water to all of you. I would like to welcome you all, first of all, to our premises and to thank you for your patience, especially those of you that have been waiting for a long time. This briefing follows a meeting that was held between ourselves, Rand Water, and the Minister last week in Cape Town, where we briefed the Minister on a number of issues, one of which was to brief the Minister on the trends we have observed in the recent past around water consumption in our area of supply as Rand Water. And the Minister will go more deeply into what this means and what the impact of this patterns of consumption that we have observed are. But we have also had high-level engagements and continuous engagements at a technical level with the municipalities that we supply water to. As some of you would know, Rand Water supplies water to municipalities, who in turn supplies water to businesses and to citizens. And we have been having technical discussions about this issue of demand and supply with the municipalities, which is why you would have seen many municipalities issuing advisories about the high levels of consumption and the need for all of us to manage water a little bit better. But that will be delved into as we go into the briefing today. This is an effort to be transparent about our assessment and to share with you what our combined view and intended actions are in relation to managing this issue of demand and usage of water. The Minister will provide a micro overview of her assessment of the current supply and demand and the relationships through her department around how we will manage this situation. The point is that the availability of fresh water is an important thing for human life, but also for development. But water is not always necessarily available where you need it the most. And we do describe ourselves, and we are a water-scarce country. And rain is unevenly distributed within the landscape of the country. And sometimes it is inconveniently situated. It rains where you don't need it the most at a particular time. I mean, the very genesis of an organization like Rand Water is around economic development, with the origins of mining in this area and the need for water. And that's how Rand Water was born. There was no water in this area, and Rand Water was particularly formed in order to bring water to this economic hub of our country some more than 100 years ago. But all of that is also tied into the seasons and the cycles and rainwater patterns, but also recently impacted by climate change phenomenon and weather patterns that we are observing that may mean that the rains come later or they are not as heavy as you expect them to be, and so on, and that will be dealt with later on. So in order to secure the supply and to ensure that we don't compromise development activities, we need to work with nature in this regard in some ways, and prioritize how we use, especially how we use purified water in this instance. So that is really in a nutshell a summary of what today is all about, how we're going to work with these weather patterns that we are observing and other matters that may be impacting on consumption and also impacting on the availability of water, and so that we can spread the word to everyone about what we are facing and how to deal with it. It is therefore then my privilege and honor to invite the Honorable Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu, to address us on this important subject of ensuring that we have sustainable access to potable water in Gauteng region and beyond. Minister, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson, CEO. I have with me here the full contingent of my advisors, and I'm happy to welcome Alderman, who's representing one of our metros here. I had hoped that Tshwane and Johannesburg would be represented, but I'm sure you all know they have other matters that will engage them for the foreseeable future. But thank you for giving us the patience of waiting. I'll get straight to the point. I spent all of last week engaging with Rand Water, Amatole, and various other water boards to understand what the situation is, because it did seem to me that we needed to attend to this matter and address the nation on this matter. And as the Chair has indicated, we spent some time together last week for me to understand where we are. So we're here now to engage with you and through you with all of South Africa. We're experiencing high temperatures and increased demand for water. However, we are also experiencing very low rainfall. Rainfall, I'm informed, is very difficult to predict, at least in the short term. We might predict it in the long term, and it might not happen quite at the time that we predicted. But what is compounding our situation right now, the indications that our rainfall will become harder to predict. South Africa, like many other parts of the globe, is seeing a very dry season getting longer, more intense, and more frequent. Climate change is a reality, and it is affecting South Africa in this way. I'm informed by my advisors that the earliest we can expect rain at the rate at which we would want to have rain is December. So we're in for some long, dry season. As the executive authority representing government on freshwater resources, I am here to take full responsibility and ownership of these issues that are within human control. I'm here to account to South Africans through yourselves and to ensure that everything that is required and necessary to be done is actioned. I noted a media report over the weekend that suggested that the buck is being passed. I'm not sure where it is being passed to or who the buck is when it comes to accountability on the issue of water demand management, especially in Gauteng. It is certainly not the case, and it will not happen. We are here to account fully. We face you today as a sector. As you can see, we are all here, and I think when we get to question time, everybody will introduce themselves. All the sectors fully represented to make sure that we can live up to our obligation to convey a particular message to the country. Today's briefing will not be the last, and it will certainly not be the only one in the country. To the extent that it is possible, we will try to have these briefings right around the country to talk directly to the people and use all media available to us. I want to assure South Africans that the current situation is drawing the highest level of attention. I am drawing upon the best minds on this matter to work with us as we navigate our way forward. In our country's economic heartland here, Rand Water has begun to impose water restrictions to metro municipalities as a cautionary measure. It's important that I insist there is no need to panic, but there is need to be prudent in the way that we use water. I wish for Rand Water to explain to you why this has been done and when consumers should expect relief. So at the appropriate time in the briefing, I'll give over to the experts and they will explain to you what it is that we're going to do to ensure that the cautionary measures that we are looking for are exercised by the municipalities. Gauteng is not alone. There are other provinces like the Eastern Cape in particular and Limpopo, which include large municipalities and numerous smaller towns that have various levels of water restrictions in place and in some cases receive only intermittent supplies. The situation is very serious. However, it is not one that calls for panic. It is under control. The reliable supply of water at an acceptable quantity and quality is essential for the future development of South Africa. Global water stress surveys place us as high on the list as we are experiencing. We're experiencing what is called a water stress. We face harsh realities right now. We have to immediately begin to disaster-proof South Africa and South Africa's security of water. That is vital. We have to urgently implement strategies to deal with these and keep South Africans informed on a regular basis. There have been strategies that are made available to South Africans on how we, all of us, have to adapt and how we have to measure that adaptation. All of us, as water users, have to handle the limited water resources that we have in a sustainable way so as to improve our chances of securing water in the long term. As a country, we cannot alter the climate system that is influencing our weather variability and conditions. However, we must do whatever is necessary to increasingly save the water that we have and use it sparingly to make sure that we can draw it out to the last drop. We appeal to all our people, please ensure that we use our water wisely so that we can sustain the supply that we have. There are several provinces affected by unprecedented high temperatures with no adequate rainfall. Much like other countries in the region, South Africa has been disproportionately hit by adverse weather conditions and extreme variability. As a sector, our capacities are limited in anticipation of correcting and predicting our rapid changing weather climate systems. However, we must, in planning and preparedness, do the best we can to mitigate these challenges and adapt this to fundamentally different way of living and to adapt ourselves to a new environment while building resistance and promoting sustainable practices. We anticipate that the weather conditions across the world will get drier, warmer, the rainfall between intervals will be shorter. South Africa is a water-stressed country, as the Chair has indicated, and we would like to repeat that. And demand for water remains very high, particularly in the southeastern and eastern provinces, southwestern and eastern provinces, and in the central northern provinces. I expect that these regions will likely become increasingly water-stressed due to current usage trends and use behavior. This will also have an impact on social and economic development. I'm aware many of my predecessors in the water ministry have been faced with the brunt of a drought and this associated challenges that come with it. As a government, we take this very seriously, and therefore we're here to say, before we get to a drought situation, please can we use our water sparingly. I invite you all here in some time in the future, and my chief spokesperson will indicate when, to indicate to you our master plan and our plan moving forward on how we can save water and what we're doing to make sure that our water shortages in the country are augmented. As we work hard to avoid a much dreaded day zero phenomenon, I'll also be announcing water restrictions on water usage, and it is important that water users, which in all are 58 million of us, get to hear for themselves as to what to do to help South Africa save water from water shortages. So, what we called you for is to convey to South Africans that we're experiencing water shortages. Please use the water sparingly. We will go on to indicate to you the restrictions that we are imposing on you, and we expect you to abide by those restrictions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. CE.
Yep. Minister, Alderman, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As I've been introduced, my name is Sipho Masai. I'm the Chief Executive of Water. Essentially, with the press briefing today, we would like to bring to the attention of the members of public that the water consumption in the rainwater's area of supply has become really unsustainable from high water consumption point of view. As a water board, we provide water to the entire Gauteng. Our area of operation also extends to parts of Northwest, including Rustenburg. We also supply the northern regions of Free State and parts of the Mpumalanga. We have observed that the consumption, as we see it today, on average, it has shot up to 5,000 million liters of water a day. The normal and average daily consumption is at 4,368 million liters of water a day. So in essence, in our area of supply, we have seen just in recent times, in the last 2 weeks or so, particularly in the beginning of September as we moved over into spring, that our consumption has shot up by 532 million liters of water a day. Just to give you the numbers, if you were to take that 5,000 million liters of water a day and break it down to the number of consumers that we supply with water, our average consumption will give you close to 320 liters per person per day in our area of consumption, 300 plus. The average international water consumption per liter per person per day is 170 liters per person per day. So we're shooting and we have shot to 320 plus liters per person per day. If we were to take non-revenue water and all possible losses, that number still oscillates around 300. It's still high. And research has indicated for a number of years now that a normal person can go about with 25 liters per person per day. But if you want to push it and say 100 liters per person per day, that will still be sufficient for all of us to go about with that consumption. So very clearly, the water that we're consuming has shot up to more than what we should be consuming. So if we were to take 4,500, 4,400 liters of water per person per day in the system, the indications are that if we go back to that number, we'll still have enough water to go about for all of us. All that we need to do, as the Minister and the Chairperson has said, is to use what we have sparingly. We have been making calls to request the members of public to use water sparingly, and as a result of which we have not received a good response, and to that effect we have imposed restrictions. What are we saying? We are simply saying if we are to use water sparingly and use for water, drinking water for drinking water purposes, we should be fine. So there's no need to panic. Do we have enough water? Yes, we have enough water. Don't we have enough water? Yes, we don't have enough water. Why? It's a function of how we use water. What we see during this period of time, in terms of why the consumption picks up, is because we are seeing members of public and the consumers at large using water mainly for non-drinking water use. What does that mean? Most of the consumption is going to gardening our lawns. Most of our consumption is going onto filling our pools. The normal reaction by all of us in normal households is that when we start seeing the pool levels dropping because of the high evaporation as a result of high temperatures, we top it up. We top it up with clean water. And indeed, because spring has sprung, people want to water their lawns. Remember, we are using drinking water. We are now at a point where we cannot be running our sprinkler systems. We are now at the point that we cannot be using water for any other use other than drinking water. other than drinking purposes, for cooking, basic consumption. So sprinkler systems must be switched off. If you have to water your garden, do it before sunrise, do it after sunset. Don't use a hose pipe, use a bucket. If you can, if you are an ardent and gardener, mulch. That will save you a lot of water in terms of evaporation. So these are the basic things that we need to put in place. Use water sparingly, use water for what is intended for. In the normal household, inside the house, starting in the bathroom, reduce the amount of time you're taking to shower. 2 minutes. 2 minutes is more than enough. I time mine, and I'm sure all of us can do that. If you really have to bath, make sure that you don't fill that bath. 20 centimeters, it's more than enough. When you brush our teeth, when we shave, don't let the tap run. Close it, soil yourself with a lotion or a toothbrush as you brush, but close the taps. Toilets, please, for those that can reduce their system sizes, make them smaller, dual flush. For liquid material, press the small button. For solid material, press the, every drop counts. So if we come together for each and every household, we should be fine. There is enough water for all of us in the system. What we have done in the last few weeks or days, we have imposed restrictions. And the question is, when are we going to give a relief? We are going to look at giving a relief if you go back to an average consumption of 4,400, because we're sitting at about 5,000 now. If you start saving that 500 million liters of water a day, we will look at providing that relief. But because of the climate change, we cannot go back to our old ways of interacting with water. We have to maintain it at that level. What we need to remember is that in terms of the water cycle, we are not getting any new water in the system. It's the same old water cycle. The water that we're using is the same water that was used by dinosaurs hundreds and hundreds million years ago. They were just using it sparingly. That is why we're finding it. It's the same water cycle. The water evaporates, condenses, precipitates. What has happened with climate change is that we have disturbed that cycle. We need to respond accordingly by using water sparingly. So indeed, we'll provide relief if we come to that period of time when we have used water sparingly. We are going through a water stress period of water supply. We would like to request members of public to respond accordingly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will now be opening the floor for questions. Firstly, you identify yourself, the media organization you represent, and give us one question. So I will take a batch of 5 questions at a go, and then after that we'll take another round. But I think the explanations that have been given are such that we won't be having as many questions. ENCA, please introduce yourself.
My name is Masha Khalataka, as you said, from ENCA. We've heard this before. It's been said we were in the same situation last year. We were here with your predecessor. She told us the same. And then there was the message of water restrictions and people should use water sparingly. Have these restrictions worked at all in terms of finding the culprits who are not adhering to the restrictions? Has anyone actually been punished for it? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, gentlemen. Introduce yourself.
Dorian Alexander Al Jazeera. Minister, can you give us an indication of what water infrastructure, the state of water infrastructure in the country, and how that is affecting the droughts in the various regions? Thank you.
Yes, yes, lady.
Lindiwe Sisulu from Africa. We just want to know the master plan that you are going to announce. What's the timeline of that, and is infrastructure included in that master plan? And then secondly, the water crisis in Hammanskraal. How is government dealing with that? It's been 5 days and people are still without water. Can you give us any feedback on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Minister Amanda Watson from the Citizen.
in your latest water report, there's 9 hotspots where all sewage is leaking into rivers. What are we doing about that situation?
Okay, let's take the last one. Oh, no questions. Oh, yes, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. People in Tshwane, I'm sorry, I'm David from Tshwane. People in Tshwane.
So which media organization do you represent?
Freelance.
Sorry?
Freelance.
Yeah, but which media organization are you reporting for today?
Freelance.
But who are you freelancing for? Who are you going to report to for?
I've done articles for Record and Sunday Times. Record newspapers and Sunday Times. Like ESCOM has published load shedding, are we going to get water shedding schedules? Because people are very concerned that their lives are disrupted when the water runs out.
Okay, we can start with answering the first batch of questions.
Okay, shall we start off with the freelancer? We're here to say if we use our water sparingly, then we will not get to the point of water shedding. That's why we are here. We've observed the weather patterns, we've observed the increased use of water by our consumers, and we wanted to make sure that they understand that if we go on at this rate, we will get to the water shedding. But if we stick to the restrictions that are there, we will not get there. Okay? The first, I thought the chairperson was going to indicate on a lighter note that if you're showering, you can shower together. So it's not all bad.
Yes.
But the ENCA question that we've had the same message, and well, we can't predict our weather patterns. It is also brought upon by the weather conditions. It is getting hotter and hotter, and we're not getting fresher water. We are in the process of getting on to phase 2 of the Lesotho Hydro scheme, but it will take some time to get downstream. So at the moment, we have the water that we have. And yes, it will probably be the same next year as well, I don't know, but we cannot determine the weather patterns. It is just...
It was more about whether the restriction part of it is working. Is it working to have, because we have the message, please use water sparingly, there will be restrictions, and there will be bylaws, for instance, for you to, for instance, pay a fine. What I'm saying is, South Africans seem not to be listening really, or were not adhering to what you're saying. Is it working? Do you think the restriction part is working?
I'll ask the CEO to respond to that, but the reason why we have those restrictions is because we expect that everybody will be responsible enough to adhere to them. Should we find that they're not adhering to them, then we will get to the second stage, which will probably be to make sure that they get the necessary reprimand. But the CEO will respond in depth to that question. Would you like to do that?
Yes, thank you. I think historically we have found that the restrictions that we have imposed have worked. About 2 years ago, we went through the same kind of a situation. We imposed restrictions and we recovered. I think it's a cyclical thing, but by and large, when we send a clarion call for people to use water responsibly, they do. We strongly believe that the members of the public will respond, and we will not go into a next level of restriction. There is enough water to go about for everyone. All that we need to use is to maintain the consumption at very low level. But before, with our demand management interventions, water conservation and demand management interventions, we have seen a good response, and as we impose them, people don't generally go back to their old practices. But we need to drive the message across at all material times, as the minister has indicated.
Thank you very much. Then there was a question from the dreaded Al Jazeera. And I would like to refer this question to our chief researcher, the chair of our research commission. We boast the best research in water in the world, and he uses his time studying these patterns, etc. Would you like to respond to that, Desgan?
Come closer. The microphones are here.
And the soft speaker.
You will introduce yourself.
Yeah, you can just stand then.
Yep, okay. Thank you, Minister. Desigat Naidu from the Water Research Commission. Thanks for that question. there are three parts to this. So the first is that we are in a different climate pattern in the world. This is a grim reality. We've had the hottest July 2019 was the hottest July in the world in history. And what we're seeing is the southern hemisphere mirroring that. So this is not a once-off event. Our expectation, according to the climatic scenarios, is that this is giving us the step up to the new normal, and we're not even in an El Nino situation. What this means for infrastructure is the following. Firstly, whatever infrastructure we have has to be maintained to the highest levels. Losing water while SIPO is looking for 500 million litres and 41% of that water is unaccounted for in the city-region complex is simply unacceptable. So upgrading the infrastructure is a high priority, and the announcements around these will be made. The second is that we also need very new and different infrastructure. It's no longer the world of dams and pipelines. So having systematized, municipally run recycling systems is the way we're going to go in the future. The nomenclature that is being used in the science world around this is the purple pipe revolution, that we're going to have a new piping system inside our infrastructure so that we can reuse 40, 50, 60, 70% of the water that comes from the original source before we return it to the source. This is an absolute. This is a must-do. The third is that we have to get used to living in South Africa, and our infrastructure has to support that. So English country gardens don't work in Johannesburg. You need South African gardens now that use water much more wisely. And the last point I want to make around the infrastructure, and the Minister is going to make some announcements around this in November, is that we're looking at a very different way of dealing with waste. That waste is going to be looked at increasingly as a resource, but not just philosophically, not just scientifically, but have the infrastructure to support that, and look at the possibility of getting very new water sources and other beneficiation products coming out of that from what we currently call waste. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much. That goes to the second question about when are we going to have the master plan. Desigan has already indicated that we're looking at new infrastructure, we're looking at different methods of piping. We're also looking at different ways of sourcing groundwater, fresh groundwater. And we will display that when we launch our master plan, which will be in November. We were hoping to do it tomorrow, but it looks like we're too close between the testing of some of the systems we want to use and coming to you. But we are spreading the scope of what we get from the ground and making sure that we can have enough to go round. Then there's a question which I will refer to the CEO or the chair of Val Water about Hammanskraal and the seeming drought in Hammanskraal.
I'll introduce Mr. James Murphy from Swane. I think he's going to deal with that question.
Thank you very much today, Minister. I just want to state categorically that Hammanskraal situation has absolutely nothing to do with the current rainwater restrictions. The Hammanskraal situation was brought about by one of our substations getting burned down due to lightning strike. We are providing water to the communities of Hammanskraal Temba through bowsers, so they do have potable water, and we have increased the bowsers to 60 bowsers running around the entire Hammanskraal. So there is water available. The only difference is we had to shut down the purification plant because of the substation that has burned down. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then there was a question about hotspots. See, Chair? Or shall we ask Sbu to Trevor? Sbu?
This is Boom Tembu. He's the provincial chair for Department of Water and Sanitation.
Should I just try and squeeze this side?
Oh, it's not that big, are you? No.
Yes, in terms of the sewer leakages into our rivers, the department has intensified the implementation of part of the
National Water Act in terms of issuing notices and directives to all the polluters. This includes industry as well as municipalities, to ensure that we curb and stop the pollution into the rivers. Yes, with these notices, we do expect the polluters to rehabilitate in terms of the damage that they've done. And in some cases, we are pursuing court actions to ensure that the perpetrators are actually comply with the National Water Act. In the case of some of the municipalities in Gauteng, there is an intervention that the minister has put forward. You've seen SANDF on the news that to stop the pollution, particularly assisting the municipalities to ensure that operations and maintenance in their space of operation is done on the wastewater works. Thank you.
Sorry, but the SABC is left claiming they don't have any money left.
Yes, the SANDF was called in to come and help. Yes.
And they've left the project half done because they had to run out of money.
No, they didn't run out of money. That is what is running in the news. It is not true. They have been paid. They have been given the money they claimed for. We came to an agreement with SANDF that which was needed to be done has been done. Beyond that, what we have done is to bring in erode, which is our engineering unit from Ekurhuleni, which has the necessary expertise to deal with the problem that we're dealing with. SANDF did the heavy work, and we've come to the conclusion that they have done what they can do. And now we're dealing with an engineering problem, and it is being dealt with. And the SANDF has been paid.
Yes.
Thank you.
Last question about water shedding.
No, we won't. We will not
have.
We will not have water shedding if we stick to what we are requiring our citizens to do. Please use water cautiously. Make sure you stick to the regulations and stipulations if you are in the municipality to avert an eventuality of water shedding. We want to put that off as much as possible.
Yeah, the purpose of this briefing it is for the minister to tell the people of South Africa what needs to be done so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to struggle for water. And already the CEO has said we are over 300 liters per person when we're supposed to be at around 170. So it's really for all South Africans to save water, and you as the media will assist us in that regard. Let me take the next round of questions, please. I'll take the gentleman here first, the lady there, the lady, and the lady. I think that makes 4. We have a 5th one. Okay, we'll see as we go along. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Robinson from Power. From the draft master plan, one, it pointed to the fact that if we continue using water the way that we are, we might run out of water in 2030. Is that so? Has anything changed since then? Launching that formally next month. But at the rate that we're going at, are we in danger of running out of water in 2030? Secondly, there were talks about means through which excess water can be generated. One was looking at the mine drainage water, looking at cleaning that, then putting it into the system. Do we have the technology to do that? And then the last question will be about the fact that there's about 899 billion that will be required in the next decade as per the draft plan to ensure that we are water secure. Do we have, where are we going to source that money to ensure that we...
Power, you do realize that we are now straying into the master plan. The meeting is about precautionary measures that need to be taken by every citizen, and next month we will give you our master plan, where we will deal with all of these issues that you are requesting an answer on. Do you think you can wait until next month? You can hold your breath until then?
So but perhaps we can talk about the issues, the resources around that are currently being used in mine
We note your question.
I have several questions. My name is Isabel. I'm from Medford, which is a Beeld newspaper. First of all, in this water stress period, will watering licenses specifically awarded to mining companies? And then specifically towards infrastructure programs, how is the second phase of the Lesotho Highland project, how is that going? Will that be implemented or finished soon? And then also I understand Info Lane municipality, 800 million rand has gone missing, specifically for a sewage project that was supposed to also clean water, recycle water, supply water to that municipality's users.
Okay, thank you. Let's, who was next? The lady there? Yes.
Veronica Mapadi from Eyewitness News. I just want to know, Minister, in regards to the water drop or the water stress, which areas are actually critical within South Africa, which provinces, are at a very critical stage?
Yes, the next EW. Please introduce yourself.
Minister, it's no secret that you've inherited a department that is financially constrained. And I just wanted to ask, do you guys have enough money to implement the plan that you are talking about? And maybe if you can tell us how much will be set aside to see this project through, if you're at liberty to tell us.
Thank you. Members of the panel?
Are we done with the
Yeah,
questions?
we're done with the questions.
Okay. Power FM. I'm not sure if I captured it correctly.
Yeah, he's asking about the master plan related
Still
questions.
master plan related.
Of water.
2030.
2030,
Yeah. We will come back to that in November. Do you think you can wait? Okay. So that one is done. And then we had a question from the Build Water Stress, Environment and Infrastructure. And we got onto the matter of SANDF. Shall I give it to you? Yeah. Sbu will answer that question.
Can I just clarify something? The 800 million is not the money that is missing, is the money that we are looking for. Is a shortfall on the budget that is available. To sort out the Mfuleni problem, we have estimated 1.1 billion, of which there has been some funds that have been made available towards the interventions to stop the pollution into the Vaal River. And the shortfall that we have and that we have made a request to Treasury for funding is 800 million. We are waiting in anticipation that with the mini budget coming up, we may hear some good news.
Okay, I think that something was lost in interpretation. We have a shortfall of 800 million, but it is not. It has not gone walking away. We are short of 800 million, but not because of anybody taking it away. We don't have it. Then we were asked about our infrastructure. Shall I refer that to you?
I'm not sure which question that was. There was a question about which provinces. I think Minister has already stressed that this area where rainwater supplies water is obviously experiencing lack of rainfall at the moment, or rain is late. By now, with spring coming in, we would have seen the first rains. So that's one area that we're definitely talking about today. Minister in her briefing also referred to the Eastern Cape as one other area that is experiencing stress at the moment. So I'm not sure if that covers you on that question. And then the other questions strayed into the master plan, which Minister, I understand, will leave those questions till November. But there was another question about mining licenses. I'm not sure who from the technical people will be given that. The question was, during this period of water stress, will the department continue issuing water use licenses, and in particular mining? That's what I understood. Desigan, will you assist with that one? Okay.
This is on the SMR.
No, there was on new licenses, I think, water use licenses. It requires someone from the department, really.
Yes,
because the department issues the water use licenses, and they have to speak about when there is water stress, how do you process the license applications? And obviously it might also have to do with where the mining activity is and availability of water, but I'll let the technical people.
Yes, on the mining side, when the application is put forward, it is assessed based on the system that is available, on the catchment that is available. If that catchment still has some water available, then it should be assessed on those grounds. But it's not to say it's completely not going to be issued as yet. We are not at that point. So it's area specific. There will be areas where we've actually turned down some activities because there's no water that is available. So it's catchment specific.
Okay, and I can indicate that we are able to gauge from the levels of the dam when we are going to be in trouble, and from the information available to us, the areas that are particularly worrying is Limpopo, parts of Gauteng, and the Eastern Cape. On the matter of whether or not the predicted 2030 would be upon us, the possibility of a real deficit in 2030 is real if we continue using water the way that we are using it now. Then there was a question from Eyewitness.
Eyewitness News was... It was which province?
It's those three.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But money to implement related to infrastructure.
Yeah, that is part and parcel of the master plan. We have the plan and we cost the plan, and we make sure that we have the resources for the plan, and then we'll come and announce all of that.
Do we have more questions? Yes, Masifo. Okay. Is there anybody who hasn't asked a question but would want to ask a question before we give other people a second opportunity? No? Okay, let's start. I'll start with you. And you? Are you covered? Okay. And you? And you? And sorry, yeah, Masako, yeah. Before. Yeah. Okay, you should.
Okay, I just want to go back to the SANDF. So you say it has been completed, what they've been doing there.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you just tell us, the SANDF has now moved away from the Vaal basin. What exactly is it that they have done there? What do we see? What have they done? What have they completed?
Next question.
It's just coming back to the watershed. I know we're not there yet, but from a visualization point, would the RAND Water consider publishing on their website maybe a little graphic of how water consumption is going up or down today? Because I think that's when people realize actually they see how much water they use per capita. I think that would be very useful.
It's also part of our master plan.
Yes.
Thank you. Minister, maybe this is a chance to clarify this whole SANDF thing. It's not about them being paid, it's about them using up the budget they had available to them. So now they've used up their budget, they've pulled out of Vaal. You're sending in engineers, but you're still 800 million rand short. Is that correct?
I'm still doing what?
You're sending in engineers now to take over from the SANDF,
yes,
but you're still 800 million rand short.
Okay.
Yes.
You'll answer the second.
What is the question?
So if you're 800 million rand short, what are your engineers going to be doing?
Okay. Yeah, Mr.
I'm also staying with the Vaal for a bit. I know that there was a company, ERWAT.
That's EVAT, yeah, that's our engineers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So has the project started? What's the budget for that project? And how long is it going to take for residents to stop fearing that they're drinking water that has sewage?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And then how much of the water there is actually being used from the dam to flush the sewage? Those are my two questions when it comes to the valve. And just another side on, I don't know if you were aware, Minister, that there's also some residents in an area in Midrand that haven't had water for about 5 days. Is it the same situation as Hammanskraal, or does this have to do with something else?
Okay.
Okay. I think Joburg Water is here. We may allow them to
speak to Midrand. To the Midrand.
Yeah. Okay, we can start with the questions. So the last round of questions, I would imagine.
Who's the representative from? Is it you? Representative from Joburg.
COO is here. COO.
Joburg. Speak to Midrand.
You're not going to be shy.
No, nobody's going to accuse you of trying to usurp somebody else's job.
Thank you, Minister and colleagues. The area in concern is the Fontaine View area. The area we share together with Gurleni and my colleagues who is here. So the issue there is that when rainwater restricts the supply, the level in the reservoir does not reach a certain elevation. Therefore, you are unable to pump in highline areas. So we have engaged with rainwater this morning to look into the area so that they mustn't restrict that particular reservoir, which is a Torukop reservoir, which is supplied for the area.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about what exactly was the SANDF called to do in the VAL, and I'll ask Wu to do that. That is now taken over by engineers. The SANDF is heavy lift. So the dredging and the cleaning would have needed them, and they have done the job, and they have now left. And ERVAT will now continue dealing with the matter, specific matter of cleaning out the valves and all of that, which needs engineers.
Thank you, Minister. As the Minister has said, the SANDF, some of the works that they've done is to clean up a number of SSTs and PSTs. Primary recycling tanks, these big dams you see in the wastewater works, and the secondary recycling tanks that have had sludge that has piled up there for years. So those have been cleaned, and some of them have been put back into commission. So they've done some great work. Also, they've assisted us in terms of the security. The cable theft in all the wastewater works in Emfuleni is very high. That's why we need the members of the public to assist us to identify people that are involved in there. So they've helped us in reducing that significantly in terms of the cable theft and vandalism to a number of electrical equipment that is found in the wastewater works and also in the pump stations. If Minister, you allow me to proceed to the other one? All right.
Can I just clarify something? Sbu here is saying that we'll have to find a way of dealing with the people involved in cable theft. I think it's a very sophisticated way of saying, well, we'll deal with the thieves. It's thievery, and it is not people involved in that. It's just thievery, and when we find them, the normal course of the law will be brought to bear.
Yes.
The second one, please.
The second one on the SANDF versus the ERVAT. We have paid SANDF, and we still have in our coffers to date about 161 million that the ERVAT has been appointed to take over the work and refurbish the wastewater works as well as the pump stations. So we still have some money with the department to do that. But when we costed the entire intervention, it was costed at 1 billion rand vis-a-vis what we have already paid out and what we still have in the kitty. So the 800 million is what is still needed to ensure that the entire system of Emfuleni is brought into full use. The last one on that, ERVAT has started about a month and a half ago. To date, because there's some capabilities, the system is huge. So some capabilities they needed to outsource. You have seen on the media, they've advertised a number of tenders relating to some of the works that still need to be done. and some of them have already closed, and the necessary capacity will be brought in place. How long? We had said if we get the money, we will be able to do some serious damage within a period of a year. However, we know we don't have enough budget, so it will depend on as the minister reprioritize budget elsewhere, that we can begin to assist and shorten the time to sort out the sewer. We are not using any water to flush any sewer works. So I think that's quite clear. Maybe Sipho can also clarify. The abstraction point of rainwater is upstream from the sewer that has been reported. And there's this thing on the media that the abstraction is downstream, which is actually not. Thank you.
Sino?
Yeah, I think the Deputy is right. You should be working for rainwater. Essentially, the system is such that when you abstract water for drinking purposes, you really abstract it from high-lying areas of the catchment, which is where Valdam is. Then you bring it down into the system, you purify it. Downstream, you provide to the municipality. And further downstream, that's where pollution takes place. So, to an extent, we, the people of Gauteng, are spared that wrath of really high polluted water that we are purifying. But that does not make it good and well, because further downstream there are other water boards in the Val River system that have to spend obscene amount of money to purify the water that we are abstracting to potable water use. If you do that, it means the treatment costs become much higher because you have to apply a lot more chemicals. But the issue is, Masiho, that we don't have to worry the members of public that the water that they are drinking is a function of the pollution that we're seeing, and therefore they're drinking potable water. We have world-class water treatment works across the length and breadth of the country where we are able to drink any form of water whatsoever to potable standards. So we are not at a point where we should be worried of the quality of water that we provide to the members of the public. To that effect, we check even water independently, internationally, and locally, in terms of science and ISO standards, to check and ensure that the water that the members of public in the length and breadth of the country drinks clean water. So there isn't a concern for that at this point.
There was a question about will we be sharing information with the public about the availability of water, and I will ask the chair to respond to that. But I was going to indicate to you, can't remember who it was that asked that question, that it's a very useful question. It is part of our master plan, and we will be unfolding it next month, and we are intending to ensure that this is done. Because we believe that an enlightened citizenry is more likely to cooperate with us than one that is not enlightened. Okay. Chair. It was answered.
On the issue of continuous engagement on the measures to save water, yes, that is part of a sustained program. Because we're dealing here with matters of changing behavior, I think you will appreciate that it's not then a situation where you can communicate once. You need a sustained awareness creation and communication plan in order to reach all members of the public in order to influence behavior. So if you go on the rainwater website, for instance, you can get onto the WaterWise section where we also have the tips about how to conserve water. We continuously engage with members of the public, for instance, at gardening centers on a Saturday morning where we do education programs, and we provide information and education about how to garden wisely. We have a program that goes into schools that teaches the young ones who are very good advocates, in fact, for changing behaviors within families, as we know, on a number of things. So there are a number, and the minister, as she says, in her own master plan, will have a public engagement component in it that will strengthen and sustain this program of awareness creation.
And then Sbu decides that he's going to lobby publicly, the minister will reprioritize her budget and make sure that they have enough money. Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming through. Once again, apologies for the delays in starting, but if I could just recap, issues that we are facing, they are on the supply, they are also on demand side, and we trust and we hope that you as the media, as you are the people who connect us with our customers, the users of water, you are going to help us get the message across that all of us need to change our behavior and how we use our water. Right now, we're just using way too much water than we should be using. Thank you very much for coming, and we will be keeping you informed about the next briefings and where they'll be taking place. Thank you.
Hey, how are you, sir? Nice to see you again. Again, Baba.